Hello everyone. So today we're going to discuss about binomial nomenclature, and this is a very important aspect of taxonomy. So last time we talked about taxonomy that has to do with naming of different species and giving them a name. And with this taxonomy, they can identify different species using the shared characteristics. All right. So this binomial nomenclature is very important because you have different species. So, for example, just imagine we call different species using the common names. So, a common name can be a type of name given to a particular species that is common to a particular region. So, for example, we have this species in my region, like Nigeria, we call this cassava. All right, it's called cassava. And if you go to another country, another Africa country, for example, you can go to Egypt, you can go to Chad, you can go to Niger and Mali. They may have different name for the species. So scientists don't rely on common names, but they rely solely on scientific names. So this brings us to the concept of binomial nomenclature. Okay, so for us to understand what this term means, we need to check the definition to have a clear picture of what it actually means. So, binomial nomenclature is a scientific method of naming organisms using two names. Very important. Two names. This is a key point because you use two names to identify both species. Okay, now if you look at this beautiful baby, so for example, you give birth to a child, the first thing that comes to your mind is, I'm going to give this child a name. So, for example, we call this girl Stacy Robinson. Now you can see that Stacy has two names. She has the first name, which is Stacy, and she has a last name, which is what? Robinson. So, binomial nomenclature is all about naming different species by giving them two names, which you can see here for Stacy Robinson. Okay, so who developed this term binomial nomenclature and is the father of taxonomy, which is called Carolus Linnaeus. So he did enough work in taxonomy, in naming different organisms. That is why most species we actually name after him. So he did enough work. Okay, so because of his hard work and everything he's done, they gave him the title as the father of taxonomy. Yeah. So now let's understand what the word binomial means. All right. Okay. So now the first thing we need to know here is bi. Bi means two. Okay. Bisexual. Bisexual. Yes, sir. Bi. Anything bi means what? Two in biology. Okay. Then nomia means names. All right. So binomial. Bi means two. Nomia names. So two names. Okay. So that is just what you need to know. So binomial nomenclature means what? Two names. So giving organisms two names is known as what? Binomial nomenclature. Very good. So that is that. So the two parts of scientific name. Now, this is very important because every scientific name consists of the first part of it is called the genus name, which is known as the first name. So that if you want to fill a form, they ask you, okay, what is the first name and what's the last name? Okay, so it's very important. So for science in biology, the first name is known as what? The genus name, which is also called what? The first name. Why? The second name is called the species name. Okay, it's species name. So it's very important to understand these concepts. All right. So the genus, sometimes we call it the generic name. Why the species name, sometimes we call it the specific epithet. Okay. So for this video, just don't get confused. We have the genus name with the first name, or the species name with what? The second name. Okay. So just for example, for humans, if you want to name a human, use this for example. Now we have what the Homo sapiens. So the Homo is the genus, while the sapiens is what the species. So the Homo sapiens is Homo genus name, while the sapiens is what the species name. So that is just the analogy and the illustration. Okay, now we have a table that covers different common names and the scientific name. Like I told you before, the common name human, lion, dog, and cats, they can mean different things in different region. Okay, so that's the reason why the scientific name is very important. So for human, we have what Homo sapiens. So Homo sapiens, all scientists know that when you mention Homo sapiens, you're talking about human. Once you mention Panthera leo, they all know that okay, you're talking about lion. Dog, we have your Canis familiaris. Your cat, you have your Felis catus. Then your maize, you have your Z maize. Your mango, you have your Magnifiera indica. And your goat, you have your Capra hicus. Strange name. So now, if you look at this right up here, I'm going to tell you as you go further that the way this scientific name is being written is wrong. Why? Because it's been typed. So when we go to the laws and the rules in the writing a scientific name, then I'll tell you, I'll come back to this table and tell you why writing a scientific name like this is wrong. Okay. So rules of binomial nomenclature. All right. So the first rule is the genus, which is the first name, begins with a capital letter. All right. So if you look at this, we have your Homo sapiens. Now you can see that the first letter here is capital. So it's very important to write the first letter to be capital. So the genus must be in capital letter. So for example, if you're writing your name, the first name always starts with what? The capital. Then for the Homo, this is wrong because it starts with a small letter. So you're supposed to start with what? A capital letter. So this format is correct, while this format is wrong. So for the next one, for the next rule, the species name begins with a small letter. So when you start the genus name with the capital letter, the species name must start with the small letter. So for this, you have Homo, with this the genus name start with the capital letter. They have a sapiens with the species name and it starts with the small letter. So it's very important to understand this. So you cannot write it this way because H, the genus name here is capital letter and the species name here is what? Capital letter. So you cannot write it this way. So you have to be in what? A small letter. It's very important. Okay. So the next rule here will have what? When when you're typing a scientific name using your computer, for example, you have to be in italics. So like I make reference to the table that it was typed, but it's supposed to be in italics. You have to italicize it. Okay. So once you type it, it has to be in this form. All right. So you have to italicize it like this. You're not supposed to write it in this format. Okay. So this is the correct way you need to know you to write type the scientific name when using your computer to type it. Okay. So for rule 4, before we go to rule 4, now I told you in the previous video table, sorry, that here all the right up here you can see them, they are not italicized because they were typed. So they're supposed to be in this what format. That's not in the what in this format you can see here. Okay, so just for you to understand what I'm talking about. Then the rule number 4, when it's handwritten, for example, you get the paper, you get the pen, and you want to write the scientific name. What you need to do is what you have to underline the genus and the species name separately. Okay, so you have your Homo sapiens, you have to what underline both of them separately, like this and like this. Okay, they have to be underlined separately because they are what handwritten. But don't forget, if they're typed, you have to italicize it. But once you write them in your paper using your bare hands, you have to what underline the genus name and the species name separately. So it's very important. Then for the rule 5, scientific names are usually written in Latin or in Latinized form. This makes them universally what acceptable. All right, so these are the rules of binomial. So now let us go through some importance of binomial nomenclature. So the first one is that it prevents confusion. So all scientists understand this principle that okay, they understand that yeah, if you're writing the species, you use the scientific name to write it. Okay, yes, we call this species the common name, but scientifically we use what a scientific name to write them using what the binomial system of what classification. Okay, so different countries use different common names, and scientific names are what universal. So all over the world, they use what one scientific name to identify species. So the next one, it promotes international communication. So you can easily what communicate with other scientists because why all scientists understand that yes, this species can be identified and can be named using this what pattern, which is generally accepted by all. So scientists all over the world understand the same name. So it's very important. The next one, it shows relationships. So organisms with the same genus are closely related. So with this, you can easily know that okay, you have different species, they have the same genus, but and they're closely what related. So for example, just like in a family, all siblings they answer the same surname. So for example, you can have Okon Ima, Okon Gabrielia, Okon Jessica, Okon John. Understand? They're all Okon. So they all have the same genus. So which means they are what closely related, or they belong to the same family, or they are all closely related species. So you can see a very good example here. So for example, we have Panthera leo, which is lion. We have Panthera what tigris, which is what tiger. Okay, so with this, you know they belong to the same genus, which is what the Panthera. So with this, you can easily what understand organisms that have the same genus, and you know that yes, they are all what closely related. Good. So the next thing we need to know here, we just need to understand some questions that is related to the topic. Okay. So the first one is, what problems might arise if scientific names did not exist? That was the first thing. So this is the question you can just use to play with. And why is Latin used in scientific naming? So that's one important question. The third one is, how does binomial nomenclature help scientists around the world to communicate effectively? Okay, so if you watch this video to this point, thank you very much. I'm going to end the video here. And please don't forget to subscribe and follow my channel because we just started with the basics of biology. Very soon, I might just end up teaching the topic, which you find very, very difficult to understand. And I'll try my possible best to break it down in the best way you can really understand it. All right. So thank you very much to watch this video to this point, and I'll see you next time.